The images come flooding back in vivid detail, triggered by the most inconsequential things, like a door slamming, the sight of an Oriental woman, the touch of a bamboo mat, or the smell of stir-fried pork. Last night I went to bed, was having a good sleep for a change. Then in the early morning a storm front passed through and there was a bolt of crackling thunder. I awoke instantly, frozen in fear. I am right back in Vietnam, in the middle of the monsoon season at my guard post. I am sure I'll get hit in the next volley and convinced I will die. My hands are freezing, yet sweat pours from my entire body. I feel each hair on the back of my neck standing on end. I can't catch my breath and my heart is pounding. I smell a damp sulfur smell. Suddenly I see what's left of my buddy Troy on a bamboo platter, sent back to our camp by the Viet Cong. The next bolt of lightning and clap of thunder makes me jump so much that I fall to the floor. This horrible memory, vividly fresh and detailed, though more than 2 decades old, still holds the power to induce the same fear in this ex-soldier that he felt on that fateful day. PTSD represents a perilous lowering of the neural set point for alarm, leaving the person to react to life's ordinary moments as though they were emergencies. The hijacking circuit discussed in Chapter 2 seems critical in leaving such a powerful brand on memory. The more brutal, shocking, and horrendous the events that trigger the amygdala hijacking, the more indelible the memory. The neural basis for these memories appears to be a sweeping alteration in the chemistry of the brain set in motion by a single instance of overwhelming terror. While the PTSD findings are typically based on the impact of a single episode, similar results can come from cruelties inflicted over a period of years, as is the case with children who are sexually, physically, or emotionally abused. The most detailed work on these brain changes is being done at the National Center for Post-Traumatic Stress Disorder, a network of research sites based at Veterans Administration hospitals where there are large pools of those who suffer from PTSD among the veterans of Vietnam and other wars. It is from studies on vets such as these that most of our knowledge of PTSD has come. But these insights apply as well to children who have suffered severe emotional trauma, such as those at Cleveland Elementary. Victims of a devastating trauma may never be the same biologically, Dr. Dennis Charney told me. A Yale psychiatrist, Charney is director of clinical neuroscience at the National Center. It does not matter if it was the incessant terror of combat, torture, or repeated abuse in childhood, or a one-time experience like being trapped in a hurricane or nearly dying in an auto accident. All uncontrollable stress can have the same biological impact. The operative word is uncontrollable. If people feel there is something they can do in a catastrophic situation, some control they can exert, no matter how minor, they fare far better emotionally than do those who feel utterly helpless. The element of helplessness is what makes a given event subjectively overwhelming. As Dr. John Crystal, director of the Center's Laboratory of Clinical Psychopharmacology, told me, say someone being attacked with a knife knows how to defend himself and takes action, while another person in the same predicament thinks, I'm dead. The helpless person is the one more susceptible to PTSD afterward. It's the feeling that your life is in danger and there's nothing you can do to escape it. That's the moment the brain change begins. Helplessness as the wild card in triggering PTSD has been shown in dozens of studies on pairs of laboratory rats, each in a different cage, each being given mild, but to a rat very stressful, electric shocks of identical severity. Only one rat has a lever in its cage. When the rat pushes the lever, the shock stops for both cages. Over days and weeks, both rats get precisely the same amount of shock. But the rat with the power to turn the shocks off comes through without lasting signs of stress. It is only in the helpless one of the pair that the stress-induced brain changes occur. For a child being shot at on a playground, seeing his playmates bleeding and dying, or for a teacher there, unable to stop the carnage, that helplessness must have been palpable. Between the amygdala and related limbic structures and the neocortex are the hub of the battles or cooperative treaties struck between head and heart, thought and feeling. This circuitry explains why emotion is so crucial to effective thought, both in making wise decisions and in simply allowing us to think clearly. Take the power of emotions to disrupt thinking itself. Neuroscientists use the term working memory for the capacity of attention that holds in mind the facts essential for completing a given task or problem, whether it be the ideal features one seeks in a house while touring several prospects, or the elements of a reasoning problem on a test. The prefrontal cortex is the brain region responsible for working memory. But circuits from the limbic brain to the prefrontal lobes mean that the signals of strong emotion, anxiety, anger, and the like, can create neural static, sabotaging the ability of the prefrontal lobe to maintain working memory. That is why when we are emotionally upset, we say we just can't think straight, and why continual emotional distress can create deficits in a child's intellectual abilities, crippling the capacity to learn. These deficits, if more subtle, are not always tapped by IQ testing, though they show up through more targeted neuropsychological measures, as well as in a child's continual agitation and impulsivity. In one study, for example, primary school boys who had above-average IQ scores but nevertheless were doing poorly in school were found via these neuropsychological tests to have impaired frontal cortex functioning. They also were impulsive and anxious, often disruptive and in trouble, suggesting faulty prefrontal control over their limbic urges. Despite their intellectual potential, these are the children at highest risk for problems like academic failure, alcoholism, and criminality, not because their intellect is deficient, but because their control over their emotional life is impaired. The emotional brain, quite separate from those cortical areas tapped by IQ tests, controls rage and compassion alike. These emotional circuits are sculpted by experience throughout childhood, and we leave those experiences utterly to chance at our peril. Consider, too, the role of emotions in even the most rational decision-making. In work with far-reaching implications for understanding mental life, Dr. Antonio Damasio, a neurologist at the University of Iowa College of Medicine, has made careful studies of just what is impaired in patients with damage to the prefrontal amygdala circuit. Their decision-making is terribly flawed, and yet they show no deterioration at all in IQ or any cognitive ability. Despite their intact intelligence, they make disastrous choices in business and their personal lives, and can even obsess endlessly over a decision so simple as when to make an appointment. Dr. Damasio argues that their decisions are so bad because they have lost access to their emotional learning. As the meeting point between thought and emotion, the prefrontal amygdala circuit is a crucial doorway to the repository for the likes and dislikes we acquire over the course of a lifetime. Cut off from emotional memory in the amygdala, whatever the neocortex mulls over no longer triggers the emotional reactions that have been associated with it in the past. Everything takes on a gray neutrality. A stimulus, be it a favorite pet or a detested acquaintance, no longer triggers either attraction or aversion. These patients have forgotten all such emotional lessons because they no longer have access to where they are stored in the amygdala. Evidence like this leads Dr. Damasio to the counterintuitive position that feelings are typically indispensable for rational decisions. They point us in the proper direction, where dry logic can then be of best use. While the world often confronts us with an unwieldy array of choices, how should you invest your retirement savings? Whom should you marry? The emotional learning that life has given us, such as the memory of a disastrous investment or a painful breakup, sends signals that streamline the decision by eliminating some options and highlighting others at the outset. In this way, Dr. Damasio argues, the emotional brain is as involved in reasoning as is the thinking brain. The emotions, then, matter for rationality. In the dance of feeling and thought, the emotional faculty guides our moment-to-moment decisions, working hand-in-hand with the rational mind, enabling or disabling thought itself. Likewise, the thinking brain plays an executive role in our emotions, except in those moments when emotions surge out of control and the emotional brain runs rampant. In a sense, we have two brains, two minds, and two different kinds of intelligence, rational and emotional. How we do in life is determined by both. It is not just IQ, but emotional intelligence that matters. Indeed, Intellect cannot work at its best without emotional intelligence. Ordinarily,